Hello, everyone. I'm excited for today's episode. Welcome to People Who Inspire, PWI for short. I'm excited to have Joojo as my guest. Hi, Joojo. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. How's your day going so far? All good?
Okay, it's a Sunday, so you get to wake up late on the weekend. You just get to cruise through the day. So I'm just chilling.
Yeah, just chilling. You know the interesting thing. I remember the exact moment I followed you on Twitter, and I'll show you something. And I know you're not expecting this, but I want to see your reaction. So Joojo for those of you watching, I followed him because I thought, no, this guy's a genius, and I'll show you why. I'll play a video. I'm sure you remember this. This was in I think 2021. When I saw this video, I was like, okay, no, this is next level. This is next level. Yeah.
For those of you who are Ghanaian, for those of you who are not Ghanaian, please do not find out what those things mean.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think for the Ghanaians, you understand, but we'll get into some of these things later. So, Joojo, one thing I also see that you, just to start at the bell, you do a lot of workouts, and like how important is like keeping fit, to your whole lifestyle in general. Because I see you in the gym and all that, and some of us we don't do that.
I mean, for the kind of job I do, okay. So I mean, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a software engineer. I work with AirAsia. I work on the identity access management team. We basically handle access for users throughout the super app, throughout all lines of businesses. Yeah, that's basically what my team does. And to be a software engineer, most of the time you sit down the whole day. So you get into work at 8 or 9 a.m. You're sitting the whole time. The only physical activity you probably have is with your fingers and nothing else. Every now and then you take a step away from your desk, but you are sitting at your desk the whole time. So just as part of my daily routine, I try to go to the gym to just get myself active and move around a bit and just keep myself in good shape. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And like you mentioned, so can you just walk me through a bit of how you grew up? Because one of the interesting linkages that I always make is this kind of link or bearing between how one was brought up and what they're doing now. I'm not sure if that's the case for you, but can you just tell me, walk us through a bit of how you grew up, where did you school, up until this point? Just for my viewers to know a bit of your background.
Okay, so first of all, I grew up in Adenta. Those of you who know, who live in Ghana, yeah, I grew up in Adenta Snit Flats. I lived there for most of my life up until high school. Yeah, because in high school I had to go to boarding school. I went to advanced film school, the only school. Yeah, so I spent 4 years in advanced film school. I studied visual arts, and then after high school I left Ghana and moved to Malaysia. When I got here to Malaysia, I came to do my undergrad. I did my undergrad in computer science, and then I did my master's degree. I did an MBA with a concentration in information technology. And basically my connection to what I do now as a software engineer, I had access to computers pretty early. I was fortunate enough to have parents who thought it was a good idea to expose me to technology, and it inspired my passion for this design. That's my initial passion. So I started tinkering with computers and doing photo manipulation pretty early as a kid, and that is my initial connection to computers. So I did design up until I went to the university, up until my undergrad. And just during my undergrad, in my first, second years of design, I felt like I was already good at it, and I didn't want to spend 4 years on that. So I just went to the next best option for me, which also had to do with computers, which was software engineering. But coming from an arts background with no science, that made it pretty difficult. So I'm not going to lie, it was a very torrid 4 years. Yeah, very torrid 4 years, but it's all done.
You did science, from there you did computer science, and then but then I was like, okay, we're designer, and then I was like, okay, how so, like, I'm interested in that bit, right? Because I think it even requires a certain mental fortitude to really like push through, because naturally, like let's say that's not your background, right? So like, how did you do it? Like, that's what I'm interested in. How did you do that transition?
So initially, when I was in Ghana, I was pretty shitty at math. I was pretty shitty at logic. And I like to blame it on the process of knowledge ingestion for a lot of Ghanaian schools, because the kind of education we go through, especially at the junior level, it's very passive. No, like very little activity going on, very little interaction between who provides the knowledge and who ingests the knowledge. So I had an issue with that. So my base knowledge when it came to math was pretty shitty, it was pretty bad. But moving here and getting into uni and, properly getting through a logic subjects like digital systems, math, physics, the way we were being taught here and the way we went through studying here, the amount of application with what we do really helped me a lot, especially when I wanted to shift. So initially getting into software engineering, I just came in with a clean slate. I had very little experience, and I mean at that time in school, yes, it is understandable that you have very little experience. But with respect to studying, yeah, I hadn't done any science-based subjects. So the first year it was very difficult, especially trying to understand some of the basics in math and having to practice and practice and practice all the time, because you
Wow.
do a lot of subjects in your first year in computer science. So that did take a lot of mental fortitude. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Like, it's really, I'm always like amazed, because I mean, I was like, sometimes I think about like myself, I'm like, okay, is it too late? Like, so let's say Jojo, like someone is watching, the person is, let's say 30 years, he studied non-science related course, and is thinking about software engineering. Is there hope for someone like me?
Of course, of course, of course, of course. I used to have, so I worked on a team that worked with another team at AirAsia, and they had an engineer who was 54 years old. They had a software
Oh,
engineer. Yes, and he had just moved from the shipping industry when he was 50, and he was looking for another career to get into, and he became a software engineer at 52. So
oh,
it is
wow.
really, yes, it is really not never too late. And the good thing about this career is that, surprisingly, the bar for entry is significantly low. So you have a few YouTube courses, a few Udemy courses. You can at least understand the basics and, you go through few episodes of trial and error and get to know some of the things that we do. And slowly, consistently, you will be able to pick up. So it's never too late for anyone.
Okay, it's never too late for anyone. I like that. So let's say you finished. One of the things that stood out for me with your background is, when I was doing a bit of reading about your background, is specifically the project you did for your MBA. The reason why that kind of caught my eye is that I work in a pharmaceutical supply chain as well. So, being in that space for a bit. And what struck me was the project. Can you tell us a little bit about that project? Because it was like, I think for me, I think that's like a very, using AI to identify like cancer or something like that. Can you just
Yeah. So
projects, like what were some
okay.
of the highlights of that project?
Okay, so funny enough, I haven't had this project since 2021. Okay, so this project was basically being able to do a mortality rate prediction for osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer. And my research was basically using data we had gotten from clinics, a few parameters that are very consistent with osteosarcoma patients. So my research was basically to go through these patients and look at all the parameters and items that some of these various clinics had provided us confidentially, and then map them to how long they were able to live right before, how long they were able to live after diagnosis. So basically, my research just helped build a model that ingests this data and then learns from the parameters and the amount of time the people had to live after diagnosis, and try to predict the time frame for newly diagnosed patients and how long they have to live. So it was quite a number of parameters. I think 31 different parameters. So yeah, this was basically what the research was about, being able to
Wow.
predict how long osteosarcoma patients had after diagnosis.
Wow. Sorry, that's serious. I mean, like, wow. and the fact that I think you had used some artificial intelligence and machine learning, like it's like when I was reading a bit about it, I was like, wow, this is like real life applications, right? So that kind of brings me to how you got into AirAsia, and like, can you tell us like how first of all, how did you discover the role, and how was the interview process? I know software engineering interviews are like quite laborious and draining, right? So can you just walk us through how you got into that role?
Okay, so I was in my previous company, and my previous company wanted me to move to China. At that moment in time, I wasn't really feeling the move because I was still settled in Malaysia and I still wanted to work here for some time. So I was looking for companies to apply to. So I had applied to quite a few companies. I saw a few openings at AirAsia. I applied to AirAsia like 12 times, 12 different applications, and I got responses for about 8 of them. And then I got a call back for 2 of them. So the 2 of them that they got in touch with me, I had interviews with them. I failed the first one. I was going to join the chat team, and then I passed the second one, which is my present position. So basically, the interview process, I was being hired initially as a Golang engineer to join the identity access management team. So I first went through a phone interview just to assess things and assess my experience. And then I went through a first technical interview, which I failed. And then I went through another technical interview, which I passed. And then
Wow.
then I went through a behavioral assessment interview, and then a future prospects interview. And then I got in. The funny thing, the most
Wow.
peculiar thing about my technical interviews was, so they asked me the same questions in the first stage, the first technical interview, and then the second technical interview. So I asked them why they did that. And because after I finished the first technical interview, I was so bummed, I was so down. So I just said to myself, let me just see what these questions are. So I went back and I researched about the questions, and I tried to fix what I didn't know, and I learned from the questions. And funny enough, they asked me the same questions the next stage. So later on, when I got in, I
Wow.
asked my manager. Yeah, I asked my manager why he did that, and he said he wanted to see the ability of an engineer to learn from their mistakes, be able to make sure that they gather knowledge once they realize they don't have it. And he liked that aspect about me. So that is why he hired me.
If I look at, there's something I saw with you, is that you did a blog post, I think 2 years ago, about going through Amazon interview, and then you shared some lessons. And here also I realized you don't shy away from even the failures that come with your journey, right? How important is failure to the journey of success from your point of view?
Okay, so you do realize that until you succeed, you have to continuously fail. There's no way out of it. Until you succeed, you just have to keep failing and failing and failing and failing. It's just consistent failure till you actually succeed. And there are most people who don't try as much as successful people fail. When you don't stop trying, you may succeed. Okay, if you stop trying, you definitely will not succeed. So sometimes it's hard to fail. I go through a lot of interviews and I consistently fail them. I failed my interviews at Amazon, and those were tough. Those were tough. I didn't get interviews at Coursera. I didn't get interviews at Snapchat. Those were tough. Those were tough. But when you realize that there is no other way and you just have to keep failing, you start to understand the process and you in some way start to enjoy it. The other thing is, when you keep failing, you keep learning, because failure highlights in our profession, it highlights absence of knowledge. It highlights your inability to maybe sell yourself or properly propagate your knowledge. So it always highlights some level of inadequacy, which you have a chance to improve on, or which you have a chance to fill up, which you have a chance to learn, which is good. So you just have to keep failing up until you get there.
I mean, that's one thing I saw or I've seen with your journey. Like you don't shy away from even sharing, some instances of failure. And I really, support this whole philosophy that you have with this. Now, when we come to AirAsia, one of the things that I saw from also like kind of read a little bit about like the work you do is like, how many customers are you reaching? Like, if you look at the scale of what you do, right? Like how do you, when you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, look, millions of users are using like the product you and your team are working on. Like, how do you feel? How does that make you feel? It's like a lot of pressure on you to deliver out. Like, how do you feel?
To be honest with you, it is one of the things why I like working for big companies. I specifically like working for companies with very large user bases because it highlights the importance of my work. It highlights the implications of failure on my work. It also highlights how alert and how aware you have to be of what you are doing. It also presents to me a huge amount of edge case scenarios I wouldn't have otherwise encountered with a very small user base. So when you have a product and you have many users using it, you are able to build on your experience because you encounter very new problems all the time. So this is something I definitely like. Throughout my career, I may not be the one to control my career path, but if I had the chance to forge my own career path like most of us would, I would just like to, confine myself to working with large user bases. Waking up in the morning and going to work, it feels good. I'm not gonna lie, it feels good, especially when I work specifically with a service which is the SSO service, the Identity Access Management, which every user has to go through because we provision access and refresh tokens throughout their applications, and these users have to communicate with all the lines of businesses within the super app. So it is a nice experience, but when you fail here, you fail big, which makes it both exciting and daunting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary because like, like if I have a small user base, like let's say 10, the failure is at that scale, right? It's just 10 people. But like, if you make a mistake at that level, you're looking at like shipping out like a feature or something, like it's just millions of people, and then the impact is huge as well. And like when you talk about identity access, has it got to do with also like the data integrity of users as well? Because I'm assuming that you have to store users' data in order for them to log into the system. Is that what am I getting it right?
Yes. So my team manages user authentication and authorization throughout AirAsia. So what we do is we also manage the addition, the change, and deletion of users' entire data or user specific data. My team manages quite a number of microservices. So we have a service that is specifically dedicated to user management. We have a service that is specifically dedicated to authentication. We have a service that is specifically dedicated to configuration. We sit in a Kubernetes cluster and we do all of the management for that. Specifically when it comes to user privacy, we try as much as possible to maintain anonymity of user data until the user themselves are accessing it, with their own access tokens. We try as much as possible to make sure we have covered a lot of edge cases, especially when there are account takeovers. So we reinforce user detail changes like phone number changes, email changes, password changes. We try as much as possible to manage user sessions when they go through these changes. So we consistently tighten up, user processes, provide and retract tokens and permissions to whoever has to access the data, just so we can maintain safety and user happiness.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I think like what you do is it's more or less. I also feel that like what you just described is, from my point of view, the kind of on the user experience in total, right? Of whatever additional services they are going to provide. I always say that like technology plays an intermediary role where like before I actually access a service, I have to interact with like a technology, some technology, right? So like what you do is, in my view, from a non-technical point of view, it's also like a service, right? Because if the software authentication is always, the experience is bad, then I'm not even going to buy a ticket or even check flights or try to do anything, right? So it's huge.
In our line of work, especially with user authorization, you need a very fine balance between user experience, enabling a smooth user flow, yet keeping the user very secure. So these are some of the challenges we have to go through on a daily basis, because if you focus directly or totally on security, you have a very robust user process, and users would have to verify themselves, authenticate themselves every now and then. But if you decide to also consider user experience while considering security, it provides many challenges that you'd have to think about when planning a user story or deploying a feature for a user.
Yeah. So Joojo, I'm watching PWI today, right? And then let's say I want you to, let's say, give some tips, right? So because we are looking at becoming a software engineer, you talked about your journey, right? But someone is watching PWI now, and the person has no background in computer science or science, right? So what would be, from your point of view, the three most important skill sets they need to hone or they need to work on in order for them to be successful software engineers? What, from your experience, what three are the topmost from your personal journey?
Okay. I would say being able to accept that you are always learning. Being able to accept that you're always learning and there's no end to it. If you have the attitude of always trying to acquire knowledge or some level of childlike curiosity, I think that is definitely a bright factor for you in this field, because technology changes so fast, technology grows, there's new things all the time, there's probably diversions you'd make that you didn't know you have to make. So the preparedness and readiness to be able to learn something at any time is a good skill. Also being able to listen, being able to accept feedback and criticism, because within this profession, within engineering, there are quite a number of companies who are trying to label stipulations for how software is built, and software architecture and software design. Quite a number of things have been put down, like Uncle Bob's book, many textbooks, many PDFs. There are some things that are still not documented. There are some things that you experience down the line while while you are building stuff, and you definitely cannot consume all of this before you become a software engineer. So being able to listen is a good trait. Being able to learn from people who came before you and people who have experience with building systems, and also being able to understand what they are saying. The last thing I'd say to be a software engineer is just have fun with it, I think. Yeah. Just be able to have fun with it, because you will have problems every day.
Yeah.
There will be errors every day. You will almost never in your career write full software without errors. So if you are somebody who easily gets agitated, you you may not enjoy this. So just be able to have fun with it. Just be able to see errors and find them as an opportunity to learn, and you will enjoy your journey in this career.
Yeah, I like the last one. Have fun with it. I think that's something sometimes we lose focus on. Like, we are so serious, no, we want to build, fun stuff, and then yet we are so serious and we want to build fun stuff. You need to have fun with it. I like that. There's a second group of people who are already software engineers, right? So let's say there's someone who is fresh out of university watching this, and they are preparing for a software engineering role, right? So can you maybe explain, first of all, maybe what the typical software engineering interview process is like, and what such a person should look out for in such an interview?
Okay, I mean, it differs a lot for the stage in which you are hiring for. So for a fresh grad, I mean, most hiring managers or most software engineers will not expect you to have industry level experience. Most people will not expect that. They just a lot of engineers want to see your tenacity when it comes to solving problems, your ability to logically think. Okay, so that's why a lot of the time I tell people during who are going through their computer science degree to pay attention in class. Listen to what you are being taught, because when you get into an interview as a fresh grad, you don't have experience. So a lot of the time, they assess you on the things you've learned in school, because your knowledge is fresh. You are a fresh grad. So you'll be asked about things that have to do with data structures and being able to solve, some level of complex problems. A lot of hiring managers want to see your ability to break down a problem, first understand what the problem needs, being able to understand what you have to do to solve the problem, probably in a brute force strategy, being able to provide a reasonable solution that attempts to cover most of the test scenarios. And then maybe after that, you can improve on the time complexity and space complexity of the problem you have. So for a fresh graduate, just be able to understand problem requirements, just be able to understand the problem, be able to do something, or be able to think logically with respect to data processing and provision on how to solve the problem. Just understand how to think logically in this scenario. And then maybe improving on that, you can understand how to make your solution more efficient. Yeah. So in those cases, you won't need experience, but just try and remember what you studied in school and be able to think logically.
Yeah. That's thanks for that. There's this whole conversation around LLMs and large language models, artificial intelligence. I'd like to take your view on this because you have built at least like the video I showed earlier. You have built some fun stuff around this, using this Ghanaian insult thing that you built. Like, what is, from your point of view, being in the technology space, what do you think is the future of this whole, this whole hubbub about artificial intelligence? Because it's taking over. Like I just saw, is it Sora from OpenAI, where you just put a text prompt and it kind of generates videos, right? And I think about like from where you sit, right? This is like picking your brain generally. What do you think would be the impact of AI? Is AI going to take our jobs?
So this reminds me of the early days of social media. So I think right between 2004 and 2010, there's so many times when people write essays on the impact of social media on our lives and how good or bad it is. Like most eras of technology, there's a huge impact on easing the lives of humans. There's a huge impact on improvement. AI specifically for me, with ChatGPT, it makes information easily accessible. And not to say we didn't already have information easily accessible. It makes information accessible in the sense of how it is presented to you and what specifically you need. So situations like this help us, in very different fields, make us more productive. It's like having a personal assistant, make us more productive, give us the chance to spend time on other things we would rather spend as opposed to gathering the information artificial intelligence can help us with. So these are some of the, advantages, it provides to us. We've seen some of the downsides of AI, especially when it comes to its ability to fabricate. We've seen some of the downsides, especially when it comes to the dependence of a lot of people on AI. It makes us lazy, especially when it comes to processes of data retrieval. It makes us lazy with respect to learning because it seems like we have a full knowledge base, just sitting somewhere. So it does have its upsides and then downsides. With respect to AI taking our jobs, I think, as a software engineer, if you classify yourself as, somebody who just implements design, somebody who just codes, in many contexts, some people call this a code monkey. I think if you classify yourself as somebody who just, writes software, without critically thinking about architecture and design, yes, you may be easily replaced by prompts because people just put in prompts and they could have software written. But I think there are very different nuances in software, especially when it comes to architecture design and software design and building software as a whole, that at the design level and at the architectural level, if you spend more time trying to understand how software works and some of the edge cases when it comes to design, picking out technology, knowing the differences between let's say on GCP, knowing the differences between going all the way up to a cloud function, how different is it from coming down through Cloud Run and then going down to Kubernetes and managing your services, your replicas yourself. Being able to understand when to choose these technologies, what technologies to use, when to choose JavaScript or when to use Golang, understanding threading, all of these things. If you try to encompass software engineering, software design as a whole and think about it, I think you'd be able to provide more value, which is not irreplaceable, but definitely comparably harder to replace, and you would be able to provide more value to whoever you're working with, whoever you're communicating with. So with respect to AI, it does have its advantages, which is so much, and does have its disadvantages, relatively enough. And people should just use them wisely. Yeah.
I think you mentioned something that I agree with wholeheartedly. That's value, adding value, right? So I think sometimes we get caught up in the excitement of the moment, about the AI. We had the same thing with NFTs as well, right? Where people just got excited, with NFTs and things like that, and we forget about, okay, what is the underlying value, right? And I think, like you rightly said, we as humans, if of course keeping everything equal, we bring value, right? Sometimes even just being present at a meeting is value adding, right? So yeah, I completely agree with you on that, definitely. Yeah. When I look at software engineering in Africa, so I want us to bring this a bit back home. What do you like? So a bit of context. A few years ago, my team, so I kind of started a technology company back in the day, and we got to a point where we're looking for software engineers, right? Because we're building these geographic information systems applications and stuff like that, using GIS mapping and stuff like that. So the problem we're having was we conducted lots of interviews and we were not getting like the kind of level of, like you said, analytical thinking that we kind of needed for the team. And so this kind of, whilst I was preparing for today's session, I was thinking about it, like, Joojo, what do you think is missing in that space, especially kind of the space of finding quality software engineers in Ghana and in Africa at large? There seems to be a smaller pool, right? It's the same people, but those people they already have gigs, right? So I remember we got some recommendations, but these guys were being paid lots of money, and then the rest were not up to par. What do you think is missing?
Okay. I can't necessarily speak on the wealth of talent. From my point of view, I think Africa is extremely wealthy when it comes to software engineers. I think there are so many brilliant engineers on the continent, even in Ghana. If you look on Twitter, there are so many engineers who are great at what they do on whatever layer of system, be the presentation layer, logic layer, data layer. We have quite a number of people. I think the problem may not be the wealth of knowledge or the ability to think analytically. I think the problem may be found in our ability to sell ourselves. I think there are quite a number of talented software engineers who may not have been able to sell themselves properly through their CV or through their LinkedIn or through their social media or even through the interview itself. Being able to highlight their successful points properly and apply them to how they could also help the next company succeed. So I do not necessarily think there is there is a hole or there is an absence of knowledge. Lots of talent. Probably being able to sell themselves will do them a lot of good. Being able to understand, because there are so many cases where you find engineers who have done great things, but you go through the interview and it's a bit underwhelming. Then you start to realize it's an issue of not being able to sell yourself. It's an issue of not being able to properly propagate your abilities and talents to the next person, properly not being able to sell yourself to the goals of the person who is trying to hire you. So, I think once we also as interviewers or also as hiring managers, when you also go into an interview, sometimes the kind of questions you would ask to try and understand the person's knowledge base, because sometimes wealth of knowledge is subjective, especially with respect to the project you're working on. If somebody came to hire me to build IAM or to supervise IAM for a particular company, I may most likely succeed because I have a wealth of experience in it. If somebody hired me to build a financial system or a fintech, application, I may still need some time to learn. I may be able to sell my skills and ability on being
Learn.
able to
Yeah.
learn and pick up quickly, but I will not be as good as somebody who already has experience. So being able to sell yourself in that scenario, even though you may not have the expertise at that moment to back it up, but being able to link your expertise in other fields to the goal of the hiring manager, whoever is hiring you, can be very beneficial to a lot of engineers on the continent. I do strongly believe Africa has a lot of software engineers that are great at their job. It would help them a lot if they, improved on how to sell themselves.
I think that's really solid. I think casting my mind back, that's a very solid point, because I also realized that most of these guys were highly technical, and they actually sometimes could not even look you in the eye. They were either, like, they are not used to this social setting, even of interviews.
Exactly. True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. That's a very solid point. And I mean, also on this same point, what therefore do you think? Do you think it's important to have a mentor as a software engineer, like someone who is like, what is the importance of mentorship in this whole software engineering space? Do you have a mentor, and is it important?
Absolutely. It is very critical. I know mentors are not, easy to come by, but it is very critical to have a mentor to guide you, because software is so diverse. Okay, there's security, there's information technology, there's machine learning, there's artificial intelligence. Software is so diverse. If you are able to pick a mentor in a field that you like, you would be able to cut the processes or have a shortcut through the trial and errors that the person went through. So there are so many people who have been through the things that you would most probably go through, and they already have solutions. They already have experience with dealing with those situations. Having a mentor allows you to easily navigate those routes without wasting the time to continuously fail and gain the experience they have. That's one thing. Another thing about having a mentor is with the confidence. So sometimes doing something, being able to do something, and then having the confidence to do it is two different things. You may be able to fulfill a task, but sometimes when you are not confident enough about fulfilling the task, you may end up making some very elementary mistakes. Mentors are around to help guide you and instill confidence in some of the solutions that you may have come up with yourself. And that can be very helpful, especially in an engineer's journey, a young engineer's journey, who may not have confidence in the solutions they may provide. I had this problem because I feel like when you are working on a system that serves a lot of users, sometimes you are so worried that your mind may not have captured enough edge cases or all the edge cases, and you are so worried that something may bomb up in production, and you don't want that to happen. So when you have a mentor who
Yeah.
is able to guide you and has gone through these situations already, they can give you confidence in your solution. You can implement them, then you are more ready for failures. The last point I'd bring up with mentorship is connections. So having a mentor can be very important to the kind of people you have access to in the industry. If you have one of my very good mentors, 𝗦𝘂𝘆, he's helped me a lot, especially when it comes to knowing people in the industry, connecting me to people who may help me. It is through him I got my first 2 interviews with Amazon. So having a mentor who has excelled in their path, has already gone through their time as a software engineer and probably maybe a manager, they may have access to people that you may never encounter in your life. And once you are able to show them your value as a mentee, and they understand how much you want this and how much you want to improve as a software engineer, they can open up conversations and introduce you to such people, and you also get to know them. You can also form mentorship partnerships with them or learn from them in different areas. So it is absolutely critical to have a mentor, or I don't like to use the word mentor because it sounds a bit too formal. It's absolutely critical to have somebody you look up to, that you can have frequent conversations with, every now and then, to check up on your progress and be able to improve as a software engineer.
I think these 3 points are solid. I follow Edem as well on Twitter, and I think he's with Microsoft or something like that, right?
Great.
He's solid.
Great.
Yeah, solid. Yeah, solid. And like you said, there are really some great talents, definitely. And I think, like we mentioned, if software engineers are able to build their people skills and how they are able to market or sell themselves, as well as, having good mentorship or like people they look up to, I think they can fill those gaps. I think, like you said, maybe the issue is not really with the raw skills, technical skills, but really about how they are able to tell people what they do and the impact they are creating. That's a good point, actually. That's a good point. I would ask my last question before, if you have any, if there are any comments, I'll bring on the screen. But what I'm thinking about is that if we look at, we've talked about mentorship, the last thing would be like, if you look at how does a software engineer negotiate, especially their comp or salary, right? Because there's this thing that when people saw I was going to speak with you, some friends reached out and said, okay, can you ask him how, like, you've gone through the interview, you've passed the interview. The last thing is to negotiate your compensation or salary. Like, are there any things to look out for? Of course, there's a general perception that software engineers, are always earning six figures and stuff. But what are some of the negotiation, let's say, tips or strategies to look out for? Do they ask for equity? Do they ask for, like, what would be? Do you have any thoughts on that, on the negotiation bit?
Okay, specifically with negotiation, one of the main points in negotiation and being able to stand out in a negotiation is having value and leverage. Okay, so being able to understand your value and leverage is a great point. And understanding your value and leverage in contrast to who needs you, or in contrast to the company that needs you. Okay, so if you look in the industry, look at the service you provide, the value you provide. Is it common? Can it be found, just around the corner? You look at the interview process. Do you think you've been able to sell yourself well? Have you gotten to the point where they want to give you an offer? Once you consider all of these things, and you consider having enough of a knowledge of people within your level and within your industry and how much money they make, you should be able to not blackball yourself. You should be able to speak directly with whoever you are dealing with, come up with reasonable figures. And I say reasonable because you have to judge how much of a value you present, at your level and to the company you are dealing with. If it's a really huge company, it may be considerable that they may find a replica of you very easily. If it's a small company, compared to a big company, they may not. Also, if you look at the service you provide, if it has to do with Web3 or blockchain, there are very few engineers as compared to basic API engineers or normal API engineers. So it just depends on the amount of value you are able to provide. With respect to stocks, I haven't had experiences with negotiating with stocks and stuff, but with respect to compensation, I usually go as high as I can, because it is the duty usually for hiring managers and hiring teams. They have ranges, for engineers. So I usually go as high as I can. The HR manager is there to help the company save money. So you just go as high as you can, and then maybe you guys can meet in the middle with a value that you actually originally preferred. One of the mistakes I made in my current role, I went really high, and I didn't get a pushback. So I kind of regretted that I didn't go higher.
Oh,
Yes,
it didn't go higher. You could have gone higher.
I could have gone. So I went like I was moving from one company to another. I went 300% my compensation package, and I did
Wow.
not. Yeah, I didn't get a pushback, and I didn't get a pushback. I was so pissed. I felt like I could go maybe 500%, but it's it is what it is. Yeah, and being able to negotiate for
Yeah,
a good
yeah, it's all
compensation
good.
is good. It's good for a baseline, because that is what your appraisal and improvements will be built on. So being able to get a good baseline compensation in a company is good. And to be able to be confident during a negotiation, usually people like to say it is good to have counter offers, to have more than one offer. When you have more than one offer, you're not desperate. And when you're not desperate during a negotiation and you're confident, the probability that you can rake in the number you want is really high, because you are prepared to leave. And when somebody realizes you are prepared to leave, if they want you, they'll give you the number you want. If not, they'll let you go. And if you are let go, you have other options that's also good for you.
That's a very good point as well. I also kind of came across this tip as well, that if you have like other counter offers, or other offers, then you could use that as leverage. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Before there are a few comments I'll bring on the screen. What has been the most, as a software engineer, the most challenging problem you've had to solve? Like the most challenging technical, like what happened? Like maybe you woke up and then maybe the service had crashed, or the logins authentication was not working. Like what is that thing that kept you on your toes?
Bots. So at the scale of AirAsia,
Oh,
you
really?
are you are most likely to, most big companies go through this. You are most likely to encounter bot accounts, bot requests, denial of service attacks. This can be very painful. It can be very painful in the sense that, for most high request systems, there is some kind of auto scaling. It could be vertical pod or vertical scaling or horizontal scaling. In our scenario, is horizontal pod auto scaling in Kubernetes, and we have minimum and maximum replicas, and we have pod spawning and pod creation, both based on CPU, the amount of CPU, and number of requests coming in, stuff like that. But there are times when you have your system hit so hard, where the number of requests could transition from maybe 6,000 requests, for example, to like 150,000 requests in maybe 2 minutes. You have that amount of
Wow.
Yes, you have that amount of hit, consistently, so you realize that other services or other lines of businesses that are trying to use my service will get 502s. My service is unavailable to them, so they can't use it. And this problem is peculiar because when you have a steady increase in the number of requests, which is via user actions, like let's say during sales, let's say we have a promotion for flight tickets from one country to another, you have a steady increase of requests, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you are able to scale up the amount of services to handle those requests, and you don't have a problem with that. But when you have attacks, you can't scale up fast enough. So the period in which you need to scale, they hit you so much, and all your resources, are attending to the attack, and then other people who want to access your system can't do it, and it gets quite frustrating because when you try to understand deeply of how ports and containers are spawned up, and understanding that images are basically file systems, and these file systems need to be curated, and you need to have the service itself running in the container to be able to service requests. If you understand into detail that it takes time for a container to be spawned up, it takes time for a port to be spawned up, and in our specific scenario, when we can have requests jump from like 6,000 to 150,000, you don't have enough time, and in those sequences you have a denial of service for quite a number of users. So this problem can be very tricky, especially trying to balance the CPU load on which new ports are created. Do you reduce the percentage of usage for CPU so that new ports are created early, and then maybe that may be costly to you? Or do you increase the percentage so that the ports can be able to service a lot of requests before another port is created? So some of these problems can be very, very challenging at the moment. We try to solve this situation by manually pre-warming the services. Whenever we have whenever we have an event, whenever we have sales, we increase the maximum and minimum replicas just to be able to entertain high requests or attacks when they come through. But we are
Okay.
thinking of very different ways to help solve this problem. So those are one of the big challenges.
Wow, that means that, like, even as a software engineer, you're working closely with sales and marketing to understand these periods of high demand and stuff like that. Wow.
Yes.
Wow,
There's
that's
constant connection
that's
and
awesome. That's awesome. Thanks, Jojo. I think there are a few comments. Edwin, thanks for joining. Edwin says, "Good morning, Prince. Watching you live from Tamale." Okay, thanks, Edwin. Bright, I know Bright. Bright is also a software engineer. Bright says, "I'm watching from Ghana." Thanks, Bright, for tuning in. I think I would want to wrap up here. Do you have any final words or anything you'd like to say to wrap up this session?
It was such a nice conversation, touching through my career. Sometimes conversations like this will help you appreciate your journey, because as software engineers, you hardly ever go through your own journey and think about it. So when you have conversations like this, it helps you appreciate where you are coming from, where you are, and where you intend to go. And I think this is something great you are doing for the industry, because it helps a lot of people who look like us, who come from where we are, and they have representation in places they may want to be. And it is good for their confidence. It is good for motivation to work harder and realize that most things are possible. Anything is possible. So thanks so much for having me.
Awesome, Jojo. Thank you so much, Jojo. I think you've been an amazing guest, and thank you for accepting to be on People Who Inspire. I think you've been a very strong inspiration to my viewers and my listeners as well. And before we leave, so which house were you in Fanscom?
I was in Bamakwa.
Oh, you're in Bamakwa.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're not in the best house, but it's okay.
What house?
Buttersnip.
BS.
Buttersnip. BS, Charlie. House in BS.
Yes.
Bamakwa, there are B-boys. There are B-boys in Kwa. They should have come to Battles so that they'll tough you up a bit.
I was actually in Battles, like my first when I got to infant school, I was in Battles, but there was a mix-up, so I had to move to BA.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you see,
Yeah.
so they are not original, but that's why, you know. Oh man, it's awesome. It's awesome having you, and you know, I know that, the future, you know, I see that you go places. I just have a good feeling about it.
Thank you
So
so
keep
much.
grinding.
Thank you so much. So nice of you to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of People Who Inspire. I'll definitely come your way next week, next weekend with the next episode. And keep being awesome. And I do hope that this episode has injected some bit of energy and enthusiasm and passion and inspiration into you. Have a nice week and enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye, everyone.